Last February, the Institute for Government and the Bennett Institute for Public Policy at the University of Cambridge launched a review of the UK Constitution. The aim was to take stock of the UK's political institutions after a tumultuous period in UK politics as a result of Brexit, the COVID pandemic, and ongoing political instability. Since then, we've published our own original research reports on topics such as Parliament, devolution in England, electoral reform. We've also published a series of papers by experts and academics, including on the House of Lords, the monarchy, and the role of political parties. We've held roundtables and events across the country, and now we're publishing our final report looking at the Constitution as a whole. The UK Constitution is commonly described as a political constitution. Unlike many other countries that have a single written constitutional document which actors are legally required to comply with and that's enforced by the courts, in the UK Parliament is at the centre of the Constitution. It can pass or repeal any law, including those on the fundamental structures of government. The system works by actors within it knowing the rules and acting responsibly, and if they fail to do so, facing political consequences. But over the last 7 or 8 years, weaknesses in this system have been exposed. There are questions about whether the checks and balances in the system are strong enough when faced with actors willing to test the boundaries of the Constitution. The system needs reinforcing, we think. There's also a lack of clarity in the UK Constitution, with different actors like Parliament and government, or the UK government and the devolved governments, having different interpretations of the Constitution, often informed by their broader political aims. And there's no authoritative source of constitutional knowledge to intervene in such debates and give an authoritative view. Big constitutional changes can also take place without broad consensus at the political level or public support. They can often be driven by narrow political party interests and without detailed scrutiny. The review of the UK Constitution makes 7 recommendations to renew and reinvigorate the UK's political constitution.
We propose creating a parliamentary committee on the Constitution to monitor adherence to norms and conventions, scrutinise constitutional policy and provide an authoritative source on constitutional knowledge. This body would be drawn from both houses, bringing the democratic legitimacy of MPs and the expertise of peers. It would also have some important powers to protect the Constitution. In the UK, there's little distinction between constitutional acts, such as the Parliament Acts, which sets the powers of the House of Lords, and the Devolution Acts, which establish the Scottish and Welsh Parliaments and the Northern Ireland Assembly, and normal acts of law. We propose setting up a new category of constitutional acts that have additional protections and require greater scrutiny. A committee should be established to decide which existing acts have broad agreement on their constitutional nature, and there should be a new process set up in Parliament to certify which bills are constitutional. Once this is done, we recommend a new scrutiny process for all constitutional bills. This includes a new convention on how much time is spent on these bills to ensure that they are not rushed through, a chance for MPs and peers to examine and scrutinise these bills in draft form before they're formally published, and a select committee stage in which select committees can scrutinise the bills, take evidence, and even suggest amendments to those bills. Then we think constitutional legislation should be protected in 2 ways. First, it should be protected from implied repeal, which means that new legislation cannot override constitutional acts unless the new act explicitly states its intention to do so. Second, these acts should only be amended through primary legislation, which are acts passed through Parliament, rather than secondary legislation, which is brought in by ministers.
Within government, relationships within the cabinet and between ministers and officials are important for a well-functioning constitution. Civil servants are there to advise ministers on the constitution and remind them of their obligations. The tricky thing is our constitution is based on precedent and institutional memory, the breadth of which most civil servants know little about. So for the constitution to function well and to make sure that proposals for constitutional change are fully developed, we focused on how to strengthen constitutional knowledge in government. We recommend that a Centre of Constitutional Expertise is created in the Cabinet Office at the heart of government to bring together the constitutional advisory functions. We also recommend that the Cabinet Secretary is given the opportunity to flag concerns about constitutional propriety. With the absence of a codified document, UK politicians must rely on constitutional conventions. But with a lack of clarity of these conventions and of guiding constitutional principles, it makes it hard to hold these actors to account. We find there is a lack of clarity in the Constitution, and the Cabinet Manual as it stands is not able to provide that clarity or act as a tool for accountability. We recommend that constitutional guidance in the form of an updated Cabinet Manual should be strengthened, and we should have a new list of high-level constitutional principles to have that clarity. A key problem in the Constitution is that short-term party political interest can often drive constitutional change, and this can happen without widespread public support being sought. On some constitutional issues, for example the voting system, political parties have strong self-interest because they have the interest of gaining and retaining power. Referendums have increasingly been used on constitutional issues, but they are binary, and this is difficult for complex questions. Deliberative exercises provide an innovative way for decision makers to get evidence about what the public want and provide a level of legitimacy and entrenchment. We recommend that the public are given a role in constitutional change through deliberative exercises like citizens' assemblies. This is to ensure that constitutional change has widespread legitimacy and is long-lasting.